The Colorado Attorney General released a report this week from an independent investigation into child sexual abuse committed by priests in Colorado's Catholic churches. The report detailed cases on 43 priests ranging over the last 70 years. The investigator said that no new cases of abuse were found after 1998, but also commented that records from the 3 dioceses in Colorado were flawed and incomplete. Patty, there is no time machine to go back the full 70 years to rectify or to figure out all the different details of these cases, but what it tells you about the current state of the diocese willing to cooperate and how the study was done did seem telling. Do you think there's going to be more to come as a reaction to this investigation?
Well, there will certainly be more to come because people who have never stepped forward might now feel they should. I mean, you read some of these stories about people who were victimized 60 years ago. They were kids. They never are going to forget it. They're never going to get over it. It's appalling that it took this long for the Catholic Archdiocese across the country, around the world, to start really dealing with this. When you think about when Spotlight and the Boston Globe really broke it open, that wasn't that long ago. And the fact that it took that long for it really to become public is appalling. That we now have a good report, good for Weiser, good for his predecessor, good for the people who are cooperating. Bad that the Archdiocese didn't feel like keeping records and instead would send bad priests all over. We're just going to hear more horrors coming, and unfortunately it's not limited to the Catholic Archdiocese. Boy Scouts are in the middle of this. We're hearing more and more.
David, what are the legal ramifications here? It seems like this investigation comes from the Attorney General's office, as Patty referenced, Attorney General Cynthia Kaufman and Phil Weiser, part of that, and then a former prosecutor was in charge of this. So this is a significant independent investigation. Do you think there's more shoes to drop here, I guess?
Well, as Patty said, as more victims come forward, and so the Colorado Attorney General's office basically raised some money, also got a substantial grant from the Catholic Archdiocese itself to hire an outside investigator, and that outside investigator was Bob Troyer, who was a longtime attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office and was the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office from 2016 to 2018. One of the things that they found no evidence, doesn't mean it's not there, but they found no indication of any abuse since 1998. And the peak period was the 1960s and 1970s, and the most common type of victim were males aged 10 to 14. And that's a pattern that's consistent with other places in the United States where in the post-Vatican II atmosphere, there were some people in the church who took that as some kind of license to run wild sexually. The report has a number of recommendations for the church to improve its record keeping and other processes, such as hiring a full-time victim services coordinator. And Archbishop Keela has said he's going to implement all of those recommendations.
Eric, do you think, as far as there's countless issues when it comes to the Catholic Church, how it's been handled worldwide and even locally, but it seems to me that this, as Patty referenced, this is not the only institution to have problems like this. It feels like a watershed moment for not only the Catholic Church in Colorado, but other organizations to, at the very least, do something about getting their house in order and implementing the systems that at least guarantee that we move forward in a safer fashion. Do you see other organizations stepping up to that, seeing what's coming down from this investigation?
One would hope so, and there's some indication of that around the country. I mean, it was just when the story came out a few days ago, so stunning, sad, sordid. I mean, here's an institution where the whole mission of the institution ostensibly is a pastoral mission, to care for people, to nurture people, and yet this has been going on. And, we keep thinking it's isolated incidents, but it's one isolated incident on top of another, and, it is not limited to one person. There were a few particularly bad actors, somebody named Harold White, who I think was responsible for 60 out of the 160 some that were documented, and he just kept getting farmed from one parish to another when the heat got too hot. And it's inexplicable to me how heads of the church, heads of those dioceses could let that happen, but it was the pattern of the church. The story hit home a little bit for me. I mean, I think people like Patty and David might remember this individual. There was a state senator from Pueblo back in the late 1970s, early 1980s. He was a personal friend of mine. We spent time together, hung out when I was working for Governor Lamb at that point in time. He was in the state Senate. Interesting guy named John Bino, Catholic priest from Pueblo. His name is in this report with 2 credible charges, and it just goes to show you never know. You never know.
Ed, what do you think about the response? While I realize I've been a lifelong Catholic, it's going to be limited of what an archbishop can do as part of the system and dogma of the Catholic Church, but there's got to be a local response. What do you expect here in Colorado?
Well, I think we saw the local response. Archbishop Aquila came out and said, look, we are going to implement all of these recommendations you're putting forward. That's new record keeping, new processing, ways to get people who are not priests and bishops involved in this process. I think the response was a very open and very quick one as they realize just the decades of malignancy that have gone on here. But I think we need to keep this in perspective. We've put this, 2 people mentioned this, there is not a case that's come forward in 21 years now. And let's remember, this has been an issue nationally for about 15 years now, since allegations first came up in Boston. I don't think if there were a raft of cases, we wouldn't have heard about them. We are in a newly empowered culture where people are going to speak out a lot more against things that are wrong. So I don't anticipate a lot coming forward from that time. To what Eric said, nearly 2/3 of the cases were the result of 5 pedophiles. That's not to say this wasn't wide-reaching. We have 40 priests implicated here. But the vast majority came from 5 sick individuals. And again, this was the 1960s and the 1970s when most of this happened. That is not to say we should not be giving absolute empathy and financial support to the victims who have gone through this. What they've gone through is terrible and is a result of an institution that couldn't police itself. And it's also not to say that the Catholic Church, they have to learn from this. They have to look at this and they have to see what went wrong and how it will never go on again. But let's put this in the political perspective, which is what we normally deal with here. If this were the Colorado state government accused of misdeeds, we would be talking about things that were done under Governors John Love and Dick Lamb and trying to tar Governor Polis with those deeds. I think we have to understand there were horrible things that were done, but this is a different place with different leaders in the Catholic Church today.
It's an important perspective. Thanks, Ed.